Hello and welcome to Sales Gambit. I'm your host Ashish, CEO of Convin, a conversation intelligence platform for the sales team. In today's episode of Sales Gambit, we have Kathleen Brown with us. Kathleen has over 25 years of experience in selling industry, and she runs the sales training firm Extra Bold Sales. Our sales system includes psychology research that gets at the heart of why people don't sell effectively. And that's exactly why today we couldn't find a better guest than Kathleen to discuss if sales is the most important thing for a business, why it is still considered icky. Welcome to Sales Gambit, Kathleen. I'm super excited to host you today.
Thanks, Ashish. I'm really excited to be here. I love to talk about how we can reframe what selling is so that everybody gets more sales. I feel like sales success is what we have to go through to get to the other side of everything we want in business. And so I want everybody to love it more.
No, and that's a completely fair point. But before we go deeper into the topic, it would be great for the audience to know you personally, right? I'd like to start the podcast with how exactly did you get into sales? If you can tell us about your story, right? That'd be great.
Sure. Thank you. Well, like many of your guests, I've been following your podcast. So I know like many people who have been your guests, as well as just generally in sales profession, we fall into this. We don't think we're going to do it, right? And in my case, I was studying to be a professional musician. Mm-hmm. So I did that all the way actually through university. I have a music degree. And where I'm so glad that I got to do that was I got to see the world. I traveled, I went to festivals. I also had to learn to manage myself and my emotion and perform in front of people. And now that I sell, of course, sales is a conversation. I'm not performing. However, I do a lot of public speaking, and I'm so grateful to have that training where you recognize that you feel some anxiety, you feel the physiological symptoms in your body, and you have to decide what you're going to do with that energy, because for some people, it takes them away and they lose their mind, right? So I'm so glad for that experience. My way for selling came from recruiting. First couple jobs out of college, I was a recruiter. I had a cold call from that. Then I moved into sales. Then I had my first firm, which for 17 years, I ran a business-to-business telemarketing firm.
Okay.
What I talk about in my book, How Good Humans Sell, is I share that I did that for 17 years. And what I realized was that people think they need more sales leads. They think their problem is they just need to get in front of more qualified people. But even when we got them in front of qualified people, a lot of people did not close the sales. And so that really led me on this curious adventure, which has led to my current business with sales training, which is saying, why weren't those things closing and how can people get better at this? So that's the full arc: recruiting to selling to cold calling to my first firm, which was the telemarketing business, and now to sales training.
So you've seen it all basically, right? From the start.
I do feel like I've called into almost every major industry. I mean, I know you know, in the startup community, of course, I'll always meet people who have invented something that's never been done before. So I couldn't say I've done it all, but I have called C-level executives across most industries. So I have some sense of what their roles and responsibilities are and their chief concerns.
Very interesting. No, this is great, actually, Kathleen. So I have a very specific question here, right? And if you want to jump into the topic now, where, why do people think that sales is icky? When someone says that they hate sales, right? And it can come in from both ways. It can come in from salespeople as well, who are doing sales themselves. Plus, it can also come in from people who are listening to those sales pitches, right? And who hate getting contacted by salespeople. Let's talk about those people out there, right? First, and we'll go to the salespeople in the last, right? So the people who say that they hate being called from a sales guy, or getting a call from sales guy, or being something being sold to them, I immediately assume that they are not good at it, right? I mean, it's very difficult, right? So if you think about it, successful salespeople don't feel the same way about selling, right? Successful people know that sales is a very important role in general, right? They would agree to that. So how do you think about that particular question from the terms of the prospect that you are reaching out to? How do you try to help them, or how do you try to create an environment where they would not want to think that? And so they would try to think that, okay, this person might be helping me completely.
Mhm. It's a great question. So if I may, early in our conversation, I'll beg to differ just a little bit. I actually think you can be great at selling and be successful and still have a lot of dissonance about it.
Yeah.
So what I feel like my research has shown is that even wildly successful full-time salespeople still are struggling just in their own brain. They feel two ways. They feel like this is something that if I follow up again, they worry, will I be perceived as too pushy? And they are still willing to follow up again. So the difference, I would say, is they do it anyway, but I don't actually think that there are very, very many people that have zero conflict about sales. I believe most people, buyers and sellers, have some reluctance and concerns about it. And I think the research I did, the data proves that. So that's meaningful for your audience, because it means that if you're a founder who wants to build a sales team, it means that if you're trying to set out to find people who have no cognitive dissonance, who have no conflict about the role, I don't think you'll find those people. I think what's more useful is just to address it head on and say, in our culture and organization, how are we going to frame selling? What does selling mean here? Does that make sense? So I think it's a more universal problem than a lot of people think. I think they think there's a whole class of rock stars who don't struggle. And I am saying, I think they struggle and do it anyway.
Okay, so you're saying that they might not like it, or they might struggle at that space, but they'll still do it because that's how sales is about. Is that what we should understand?
And that they like more than they dislike, but that so this is where I talk about making up stories. Where the dissonance comes in is when you're in that sequence or funnel process, where it's time to keep following up with someone who is only partially qualified, or they were a referral. We love, in professional services firms, love referrals, right? So they were a referral, and yet we still have to set that call with them. If they don't get back with us right away, that's where you have this space in your brain where you can make up a story, right? What does it mean that they didn't get back to me? What I'm saying is everyone has unhelpful things that pop up in their brain that are unhelpful. The really successful people look at those, can talk them down, can reframe what's happening, and can do the work anyway. Unskilled people, new salespeople, and people who are really driven by fear let that hesitation and that unhelpful self-talk direct their steps, and they give up.
Very interesting. So you're saying that if someone is new, they might have this idea being popped up in their head, which says that, hey, this is very hard, I don't want to do it, it's unpleasant, right? But they would leave it. What you're saying is the successful people will really talk it down and figure out a way to rather do it, right?
Yes.
That's how you're going through it.
Yes. And what is so tragic is when a business is smaller and the owner is the seller until they have a full team.
Yeah.
Not only are those attitudes about selling highly contagious, right? So you could accidentally build a culture that's really pretty dysfunctional about how you think about selling, but also your company might not make it because of low sales and not because it wasn't a good idea.
True. Very, very true.
That's so sad. That's so sad. I hate that. I hate that. I want that not to be true, which is why it's so important that people develop a certain level of mastery, not just on the sales process, but on themselves, on their mind, and how they choose to frame what selling means to them.
Very interesting. I've come across this idea for the first time, right? Defining what selling means to them. I mean, if I am a salesperson and I'm very new at it, how would you suggest I define selling? What selling means for me?
It's a great question. So, for example, I'll give you a few choices, the common ones. Does selling mean to you that every conversation needs to end in a closure? Does selling mean to you that you are always persuading? Does sales to you equal convince? So influence and convince are different than manipulate. Right? And everyone is somewhere on the scale about what they think. Like, do I want to influence people to buy from me? Yes, the right people at the right time. But
Yeah.
I actually truly, every sales call I make, I like to tell people, especially when I get to work with owner sellers who I know are very reluctant. I say, look,
Yeah.
if someone agrees to the call with you, there's only 3 ways this is going to go.
Mhm.
You're either going to find out pretty quickly that you're not the right person to help them, in which case you can be a trusted advisor by referring them somewhere else.
True.
Which
True.
I do all the time, by the way, all the time. And it makes me such a valuable referral partner, gives me so much confidence that I know every call that someone takes with me will be valuable to them as a prospect. Because I'll be a resource, right? So I'm either going to send them on their way because I'm not right. They're going to be right, but the timing's not right, in which case they're a marketing lead, which that's awesome because we love marketing leads. It means eventually they'll buy. Or they're
Yeah.
going to really enter the process and they're going to buy from me.
True.
Those are the only 3 outcomes that can happen. But see, that is fundamentally, Ashish, that's how I define selling. Like selling success to me is actually all 3 of those.
Mhm.
Do I want most people to fall in the 3rd camp? Sure, that's the job of marketing and me attracting the right people and figuring out how to have efficiencies and shorten my sales cycle so I only talk to the right people. There's work to be done there. But I just had someone, for example, I spoke at a conference last weekend and I had some people sign up to receive my weekly email. And she replied to the email sequence that was part of the automation. And this woman wrote and said, I'm one of those not yet people with a smiley face. Like she's someone that I could work with her. She could become a client. But she was saying, I'm not ready. And I remember you talked about this in the talk and I'm a marketing lead. And I was like, great. That's so great. Both for her to know, that so we can follow one another. I can build trust. And also for her to self-identify. That's such a gift to me. And so eventually when the timing is right, we'll probably do something together.
Very interesting. No, that's a very interesting viewpoint where you're saying that if you're able to define what sales means to us as a person, right, and it's aligned in the right direction, it can really lead to much better positive outcomes than we usually just trying to persuade the client and make them go, like I'm going after them and making them buy something, right? You can't do that. You mentioned very briefly about a scale of influence to convincing, right? I think not a lot of people realize it, Catherine, right? I'm not sure how many salespeople would realize that their job is to start with influencing and see that over the period in time convert to a convincing part, right? But that will happen over a period in time, not immediately, right?
Yes.
Do you think that this is where the sales become unpleasant for people, where they're not able to identify this whole scenario that their job is to influence initially, and they start just selling outside right out of the box? Do you think this is where sales become unpleasant for both parties?
Yes.
You and me both?
Yes. So I think to your earlier question, from a prospect's perspective, why would they dread a call? I think what comes to my mind, top of mind, is that people are worried that someone's going to sell them something they don't need, right? Try to persuade them for something they don't need. So I think that this is where the whole building trust thing is so interesting. And I really love every time I get an opportunity to talk about that intersection of sales and marketing, because I need marketing assets. I need content. I need thought leadership. I need case studies. I need things that show how I've helped other people as a way to give, to build trust, to build a real relationship. Just like, think about a friendship. I feel like all the rules people learn socially on the playground when they're children, like they get into sales and they forget all those social rules. It's like if you want someone to be your friend, you need to invite them to your birthday party. Right? I mean, there's just things you do to be a nice person, to develop a long-term relationship. And then we lose our mind when we go into a sales role and we become transactional, and we're maybe only talking about the product or feature and benefits and not seeking to understand the problem the person's trying to solve in their business and whether this is actually a solution for that. I feel like we have this false dichotomy. That's one of the things that's happened for me over a couple decades now of selling, is realizing I can have a relationship for the rest of my life with someone, and they will follow me company to company. I will follow them company to company. with amazing things like LinkedIn. We can stay in touch with what's happening with each other, and we'll buy from each other again and again and again. If I am urgent and pressuring and transactional, I give up all of that.
Makes sense. Moving our discussion to the same line of why certain people think that sales is unpleasant, right? I'd like to share some experience. In my life, I have seen people not doing the sales or not having done sales as a role themselves ever, but they still think that sales is unpleasant, or I would say they would look down upon sales people in general, right? I'm not sure if you have come across certain things, but yes, I have definitely come across that. Why do you think that is the case? Any specific reason that you could think of? And in those cases, right, for example, you go to, if a salesperson goes to they're able to meet someone who look down upon sales in general, right? What should they be doing instead of just getting offended?
Yes, it's just such a super point. Two thoughts. One is that I think whenever we take really dogmatic positions like that, there's something in us that likes to be right. So I heard an executive coach once talk about how people will their need to be right is so strong that they'll even argue for their own limitations, right? They'll even hold themselves back so they can be right. And so I think that some of it is just kind of ugly behavior. like why does one profession need to be, it's like making lawyer jokes. Like we really need lawyers in the world because the law is confusing. It's confusing, and people need representation, and there's all kinds of things that are unjust that need lawyers to take care of them. But lawyers are the butt of jokes too, right?
Yeah, true.
So I think some of it is that some people just need someone else to be wrong so they can be right. And then I think, to be fair, there are what we would call bad actors in every profession who, unfortunately, although they are probably in the minority, I think we remember those make their way into movies, books, stories, things like that. So we like to joke about it. But I have a quick illustration. A conference I spoke at recently was it was actually a coaching conference. They were teaching people to be coaches, executive coaches. And we were talking about sales, and we were talking about how coaches who want to grow their business, need to learn to be better sellers, because everyone, that's how you get more business. And one of the gentlemen in the audience was telling the story about how one of his favorite clients actually sells used cars. And this is the stereotype that everyone likes to make fun of, right? But he talked about how that relationship had helped this coach so much because it helped him reframe selling. Because what he saw was that for this gentleman who, for a variety of reasons, past decisions, difficult upbringing, stuff like that, he had been in prison. And when he was out of prison, he had a hard time finding a great job because a lot of people wouldn't touch him. And selling has been a path to a new life for him because he's figured out how to be great at it and is so sincere and loving people and helping them and wanting to get them in the right car and not doing the wrong thing. And now that whole dealership hires other people who are in transition, coming out of similar situations. And it's changing the generational poverty for those families because they can sell.
Yeah.
And I just love that example because the used car salesman is the go-to stereotype that people give, but it's really unhelpful.
Makes sense.
Making them be wrong does not serve us. And also there are car salespeople who really want to do a good job.
No, that really makes sense. In this case, right, let's say we get across someone who's really on that side where, as you said, that they want to be right all the time, right? Is there a specific understanding or suggestion that you have on navigating those situations where I, as a salesperson, can navigate it in a much better way? Probably being empathetic is one of those suggestions, but anything else that you would want to come up with?
Yes, thank you. I do like to talk about this topic a lot because there's something called confirmation bias. Confirmation bias is whatever our biases are, whatever we think is true. All human beings do this. This is you, this is me, this is every listener. Every human automatically, non-consciously and just without exception, people will go look to confirm what they already think is true. So it's almost like you know how when you click on social media ads and feeds, after a while it curates what it shows you.
True.
Our brain does that, right? So we
Yeah.
interpret a situation and we say, oh, I knew it was like that, I knew it was like that. So my suggestion is, the minute you realize that you do this, the minute you realize that as a person, most people are very driven by the need to be right, as opposed to being curious and really trying to be objective about what's happening here, we have to be very careful, or it sabotages our sales. For example, if I'm worried they're not going to be interested, if this is the biggest account I've ever gone after, and I know in my heart of hearts I'm barely ready to do it, it would really be a stretch to land that company.
Yeah.
Because I'm afraid, I will interpret what they say and do, or don't say and don't do. I'll filter it through that information. That's bias. That's what we do.
Yeah.
So being aware that you're likely to do this, to me, is the first step that could be really game changing for people, because you basically just wake up. You just realize, oh, I might be doing that thing. And when I do that thing and I need to be right, I'm not really being curious, and I'm not serving, and I'm not focused on them. I'm focused on me.
That's completely right, Catherine. A very similar question around the same lines, right? To extend the conversation there, which is coming to my mind all this while, is all this sort of directs toward mindset, right? We are basically talking about a mindset that a salesperson has to carry in different situations in general, right? To handle different situations. So how would you express the importance of mindset in general for a salesperson's success?
Super. You want to have a growth mindset. So I'm talking about Dr. Carol Dweck, fixed mindset versus growth mindset. You want a growth mindset, because a growth mindset says, I can get better with practice. And the thing is that it's just like my kids, who I made take strings because I was a musician. I made my children take music lessons when they were little, and their teachers and I were all in agreement. Like, everyone has to take for at least 4 years, because you don't like anything till you're good at it.
Interesting.
You just don't like anything till you're good at it, and you have to practice. And so we said, we told the kids 4 years. Secretly, my husband and I agreed on 2 behind the scenes. We said if they beg to quit after 2, we'll let them quit. But we needed it to be long enough they could start to experience success. And you know what? When they got into the several year range, they didn't want to quit anymore, because they liked it, because they weren't bad at it anymore. And so a growth mindset says, there's nothing that's inherently in me that I just have it or don't have it. With practice, I can gain it. With practice, I can get better. And the thing that's so tricky about selling and mindset, Ashish, is that people might be open in one way and have a growth mindset in one way, and then be fixed in others. So we always have to be vigilant to notice what we're telling ourselves, and recognize that bias and that sort of thing, and thinking, am I learning from my mistakes? How am I treating failure? Failure's information, it's feedback. I can grow, I can change, I can learn, and keep practicing.
Very interesting. This mindset part, right, where you said that, needing to have a growth mindset is very, very important, right? I would suggest, and as far as my experience goes, mindset is really a part of your psychology, right? In general, how do you really think about it? How do you conduct yourself? How do you, you think about the world and everything, right, around it? It's very, very connected deeply. Right?
Absolutely.
How do you suggest people establish that growth? How do you suggest people would look into their psychology first and then go towards their mindset? How do they control both of these two states so that they can become better at what they do, which is becoming, going onto the sales side?
Yes. So I think this is a place where other people are very helpful. I mean, one of the things that builds belief for me is being really vigilant about the company I keep. I'm very careful about my personal friends, about what I read, about what I listen to, about who I'm with. I'm always looking to be around growth-oriented learners, because they make me want to read and listen to podcasts and grow. And so I think this is a place where we want to ask feedback of others. And it's like there's a proverb in the Bible that talks about the wounds of a friend, that the wounds of a friend are really kindness. It's like, it's hard to hear constructive criticism, but if you have people that know you well enough that you can ask about this fixed versus growth mindset, I think you want them to point out and notice when you say and do things that suggest that you think you can't grow and change. Because again, we all get stuck sometimes. So you want to ask them, you want to say, would you tell me when you hear me use unhelpful, diminishing language? Would you point out for me when you see me do this? Because we do things habitually, and that's the problem, is it's a habit. We don't know we're doing it.
Yeah.
So I'm grateful that I have some people like that for me. And I periodically remind myself I need to actually solicit their input and say, I'm on a growth journey. I want to get better. When you see me engaging in XYZ that is sort of self-sabotaging and not helpful to my professional development, would you tell me?
Makes sense.
Because people, friends and partners, like they know, they know. We just have to give them permission to speak into that.
Right. When you are looking into the sales part, right? When you are doing the sales, of course, right? One of my personal experience on why people feel sales as an unpleasant job in general is that they don't think they're good at it. Second, they also don't believe in what they're selling.
Yes.
Right. And third, I have seen that, it's happening a lot more, is that they don't believe that what they're selling will do really good to the other person.
Yes.
That's the hardest part of it, right?
Yes.
If you're confident about what you're selling and it's going to that it will really generate value for the other person, you have a different spark in your eyes, right? It's a very different energy all around that
Absolutely.
You can feel,
Absolutely.
right?
Absolutely.
Going to that stage is very difficult. How do you suggest leaders can help people transition to that stage?
Yes. Asking the why. Why does this matter? What is the benefit to the person? I think the more technical a company is, literally their technical software or their financial services, and they are doing things around numbers, I see a scale where the more technical something is, the actually more challenging this is for them to understand, not because they don't have a high IQ, not because they're not smart, but because they often have a product to show. And this is the flip side of the benefit of having the ability to show a demo, right? Or have videos about your product, is that there's something to see. But I personally grew up selling professional services where there was nothing to see, because you're buying time and brain power and human capital. Yeah. And if you have to sell that and there's nothing to see, then you must have a conversation about what your prospect values. See, if you can show a demo, you may eventually get to that, but you can demo first. And my clients that show demos, they struggle with this because they want to show their wares. They want to show this first. And if you're not careful, you miss the opportunity to understand what's important to that person. Because that's the thing about value, is that it's all perceived in the eye of the prospect. It's what the prospect thinks matters that matters. And so it doesn't matter if you think this AI blah, blah, blah thing is cool if they don't think they need it, because it doesn't solve a problem that they're experiencing. So having conversations and having a growth mindset to know that with practice, you can ask better questions and learn to guide a better conversation. That is where all that goodness happens, where people realize the thing I'm selling is making a difference in the life of my prospect. And this is rewarding, which gives that whole positive feedback loop where you're like, yeah, that's why sales is awesome, is because I connect people with things that make their life better.
Two very specific questions on this, which sort of, generates curiosity for me. One, have you met enough people in your experience who really think like this, or who have really gone past the stage? And the second question would be, can the stage be achieved still in the training sessions before they become a very experienced salesperson? Because all that cycle will not come without experience, without failing, and all of that.
Yes.
So two very specific questions, if you can help us here.
Yes. Great. No one's asking those questions before. I know I keep saying great question, like these are really good. So I would say that most of the people I end up working with sales training are 3/4 of the way there on why what they sell matters. They just haven't quite crossed the line. It's sometimes as easy as one conversation. She's like, they just need to, like, something has to click. So, what would be an example? Let me give you an example. An example would be, I had a client that was a hot tub manufacturer, and the owner of the hot tub manufacturing company was a hot tub person. Like, part of why he started making his own brand is because he didn't like the ones on the market and thought they could do it better. So it was very easy for him to be excited about the mission and vision because he already entertained and his family sat around in a hot tub. Like, they were hot tub people. Some people are not hot tub people. Right? He was a hot tub person. So, but what I saw him do that help people who might come sell for him, because not everyone's a hot tub person, but they might be interested in applying for a sales position. They needed to understand what people are trying to get at when they buy a hot tub. It's not just to sit in a pool of warm water. It's a source of entertaining. There's a medical therapeutic reason. There's something behind that for the person. So I think that even if you as the seller wouldn't necessarily start out being the user of that thing, over time, you can really come to understand why it's such a difference maker for that person, and it can energize you nonetheless. Like, I felt like I never worked for him in sales, but I felt like I could sell hot tubs after I saw him sell hot tubs, because he understood that he was giving people an experience that was meaningful to them. And because that was life-giving to those people, I thought I could do that. I could connect the dots and do that because I saw the why. I saw why it mattered. So I think most people are not there, but I think you can get there through asking a series of questions. Sometimes this would be a gift for your listeners. Sometimes people just stop at the first level of question. Like, if I say to you, what do you sell? And then you answer. And then I say, well, tell me more about what you really sell. It's that secondary question that starts to get to the why. Well, I sell a way for a family to be together without their cell phones. It's dangerous for my teenager to bring their phone in the water. So they're going to leave their phone on the deck, and we're going to spend time together as a family.
Yeah.
That's what I bought, right? I bought a way to spend time together as a family. Once the seller understands that, they can connect with the buyer on that, whether or not they're a hot tub user themselves.
That's a very interesting point, right? I know that you have, the conversation that we had till now, where you have told us that understanding the prospect's whys are very, very important to be able to feel good about the job that you do, which is sales. But do you think it is equally important, just like you mentioned during the last, right, that it's also important to know what exactly are you selling? You're not just selling that product, you're selling that experience, the deep thought behind it, right? Or the final exact change that you will be able to bring in the life of your prospect. Once they know that this is a change that I'm trying to bring in, this is what I'm selling, they might feel good about the job that they do.
Absolutely. And further, I would even say, because I learned with the 17 years that I had my lead generation company, you actually need to know what you just listed even more than you need to be able to perfectly describe all the products and services, especially a new person. A lot of people who are learning to sell for a new company, they're just so anxiety ridden because they think, I can't perfectly demo that by myself, or I might get asked a question I don't know the answer to. And that will just stifle them and scare them. And what I learned is you can get really far in the sales process, even to the point that you could say, I haven't been asked that before. Let me do a little research and come back to you. And that buyer will be very forgiving and patient with you because they like you. And so I think that the ability to connect with people, understanding what they really care about, what's driving them to be willing to have this conversation with you, not just the technical thing you sell, but the sort of greater problem that you solve. If a person is skilled to facilitate a conversation about that, that can get you a really long way, even covering over some lack of technical specificity as you're coming up to speed.
Amazing. I totally agree with that, Kathleen. And I think, I'm going to be feeling much better about my role in general, about why I sell. and what I'm selling in general, and it's going to be so much helpful for me going forward.
Oh, good. I'm so glad. Well, I love what I get to do, because if I can change the way people think about selling, then I can help them get everything they want from their business.
Yeah.
And it gets to family and goals and identity and their drive and their vision for their life, and being able to give what they want to give, and save what they want to save, and invest what they want to invest. It's so rewarding because it ties to a bigger picture. And so I care about value propositions, and I care about tools and templates and CRMs, and I care about psychology of selling. But what I really care about is people.
Very interesting.
And I want
That's very interesting, Catherine.
people to be successful, and sales is the way they can get there.
Fair point. Fair point. Last but not the least, Catherine, we would love to hear your reading recommendations for audience to help them sell better, and around anything on psychology, mindset that you can refer. That'd be great.
Great. So last summer, I finally read a book which I'd heard about for years, and this is going to talk about building beliefs about what's possible. So I'm going to give you two book recommendations. Last summer, I finally read Hal Elrod, Elrod, his book called The Miracle Morning. I was scared to read The Miracle Morning because I know a lot of Miracle Morning devotees have a 2-hour morning routine. Like, I don't know if I'm willing to do a 2-hour routine, but you don't have to. And the process of visualization and meditation and journaling and reading, all the things, he gives you a morning routine structure. And it's important it's morning. It actually is a miracle morning. It's important you do it early in the day, and he has reasons for that. So the reason I recommend that to salespeople is because a lot of people need help just believing that they deserve to experience more, that they are worthy, that they can enjoy success, and that there are people who can hit their goals. And so that's kind of a personal / professional development piece that has helped me so much when I show up and sell. My other favorite book that I use over and over and over again is an old classic that's a sales book that's called The Inner Game of Selling. And it is the founder of Integrity Selling, which is a sales training system, Ron Willingham. He died a few years ago. He wrote this book years and years ago. I think it continues to be one of the very best books that talks about both beliefs about selling as well as a process to follow. And so I am not exaggerating. I've used that book in classes I've taught before. And so I've probably read it a dozen times. And every time I read it, I think, was this in there last time? It's such a gift. It's so well done. And so I recommend The Miracle Morning, and I recommend The Inner Game of Selling.
That's great. That's great. I think I have not read The Inner Game of Selling, which I'll definitely try to sort of, look into and read and learn from it. That brings me to the end of this podcast, Kathleen. It was such an insightful session. I almost, was able to figure out where I can improve in my whole process. And I would love to sort of have you again, and I'm sure my audience would love you too. Thank you again for coming on Sales Gambit.
Oh, my absolute pleasure. If there were some concepts and things that were helpful here, I guess I shouldn't fail to mention my own book. I would love for people to get my copy, a copy on Amazon. I wrote a book last year called How Good Humans Sell. And How Good Humans Sell has the research I was referencing earlier on the podcast about how people really do feel kind of two ways about selling, even successful salespeople, and they have to work through that. It's got some research and interesting info in there that people might enjoy. So thank you.
Definitely will recommend that as well. This is your host, Ashish, signing off. See you in the next episode.